Did the jury in the O.J. Simpson murder trial get it right? Did O.J. Simpson murder Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman? Did police plant evidence? Could it be the case that O.J. is guilty and the jury still did the right thing? Let's look into all that. Welcome to Trevor's Tarot Astrology and Spirituality. First off, a huge thank you to all the new subscribers. Thank you to everybody who likes, watches, shares, comments on the videos, promotes the channel in any way. If you've given money to the channel through the super thanks, buy me a coffee, Venmo, huge thank you. So, at the risk of being somewhat controversial, the question at hand is, did the jury get it right? Even if O.J. Simpson is guilty. So Netflix recently released a documentary on the O.J. case. The O.J. case came, I was, early teens. And of course, it was in California, and I lived in like the central time zone. So I watched a lot of the trial after school and over the summer that it was on because the trial lasted forever. First and foremost, I think we need to talk about what this really is about, which is about the murder of Nicole Brown Simpson and the murder of Ron Goldman. I know we focus on OJ. We probably really shouldn't, but the documentary brought about a few interesting points. And as I was watching this as a child, I was very convinced that they were going to find him not guilty. I was about the only one in the little part of the world that I lived in that thought that. And if you look at the documentary, you could see there was a very big divide amongst racial grounds back in the 90s when this was happening. A lot of that was because the murders happened shortly after the Rodney King verdicts came down and the big LA riots. And so, with all of that in mind, let's ask the provocative question: could OJ be guilty and yet the jury got it right? So let's look into all that. Okay, so first off, is OJ Simpson guilty? I don't think that we have much of a disagreement here. Um, I think time has proven this as people have thought about it. A civil trial found him guilty, but let's just ask the cards. Is he guilty? Now, when I was young and watching this, I said that they would find him not guilty, but I did think he was guilty. But I thought the jury would find him not guilty. And we'll get into that here in just a second. But let's just ask it straight up: did OJ murder Nicole Brown Simpson? I think so. Can't say with 100% certainty that that's the case, but the alternatives seem really unlikely. Yeah, he did. He did it, which is what I've thought for a while. It, he did it in some weird way out of some perverse thought about trying to preserve his family, and then I think things just went awry once he got there. And then Ron Goldman was just an innocent person showing up to return a pair of glasses, and it just all went awry from there. So yeah, I absolutely think that he did. Can't be 100% sure, but I would think that he did. I think the next question we need to ask, though, is did the police plant evidence? Did the police plant evidence? So there was some question about Mark Furman, the detective. He had made a bunch of racial slurs. He says it was in the context of um, putting together a screenplay. And although he admits that he held some pretty horrible views as well. But, he was asked, had you ever used the N word at the trial? And he said no. And then the defense turn came. They produced audio of him using that word. And then the defense asked him under oath, did you plant evidence at this crime or any other crimes scenes, at this crime scene or any other crime scenes? And he took the Fifth Amendment. He refused to answer the questions on the ground that he might incriminate himself, which is not a very good look for the jury. So, did he or any other police officers plant evidence? If you look at some of the blood had a chemical in it that, when you get your blood taken, there's that little stuff at the bottom of the test tube so that your blood doesn't coagulate and turn into a solid, block. That chemical was found in some of the blood at his house. Which is questionable. The gloves not fitting, I make nothing of that. I think that just was because, they were leather, they got wet, they shrunk. That I make absolutely nothing of. But the one glove in one place and the one glove at the other place, I'm not sure about that. Whoever did it's not talking. Isolation and being alone, the hermit card. They felt like they were on top of the world, that they were in control. They could call the shots. They could bring down the rich man. I think they thought he was guilty and they just were trying to boost the case. And it was a crossroads moment. Unlikely partnerships in the environment around. It's an interesting theory. I'd never really thought of this before, but it just entered my mind. Is it possible that someone knew that he had done it and OJ asked them to plant evidence so that he could have a better defense? The case is so bizarre, not the actual facts of it, but the evidence gets to be so bizarre if you really look at it. At the center of the reading, we get the Four of Wands about the people, looking out for the people. The environment around the world card, ends of cycles. The whole world was watching. We get temperance in the lower left. We get partnerships, romantic partnerships in the environment around. I think that's him and Nicole Simpson. I know they were on the verge of getting divorced, or maybe they were actually divorced at the time, but they seemed very much like they were in love at the time that they were together. And we get heavy, heavy burdens, the Ten of Wands. So I think the isolation is what, so isolation, hermit card, shedding a light, wanting to make sure they get a conviction for the people being the prosecution, led some people to take on the heavy burdens of actually, literally we have a pack mule there carrying stuff to the scene, so to speak. I think they deliberately planted evidence. And so we get the temperance angel wanting moderation, but also wanting the people to win, wanting to play fair, but wanting the people to win, meaning the prosecution, and feeling that they were at a crossroads and that they weren't going to win. And if you go back and you look, Some of the evidence was discovered weeks later. A blood spot on the gate was weeks later. That happened to be his blood. It just all doesn't quite add up. In the environment around you, you have the relationship between him and Nicole. You have unlikely partners. This is just Ron and Nicole, not that they were lovers because they weren't, but just an unlikely acquaintance that just happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. And uh, the thought of taking the rich man down because they knew that they were, it's like they knew the defense was going to be high powered, right? So they wanted to strengthen the case any which way they could to take him down, which was the end of the prosecution's hope for getting a conviction. But also, the Rodney King verdict earlier was kind of the end of believing police, or it was the beginning of at least being able to question police on their actions and it being more believable that they were actually up to something. So I do think that the police planted some evidence. I don't think they planted it all. I think they planted some. Underneath, we get heartbreak and we get the courts, just kind of confirmation. We get a logical approach. This was the defense, but the logic wasn't really what was needed if they wanted a conviction. So my perspective, just as being, a 13, 14, 15-year-old somewhere there, watching it, watching the trial is, why was it 6 months? It was so complicated and so hard to follow. And I think the defense's case was 2 weeks at most. It wasn't very long. I don't remember exactly, but um, okay, so he, according to the cards and for entertainment purposes only, although I think everybody believes it, I do believe he murdered them. They did not get justice. Their family certainly didn't get justice. But I also think the police planted evidence. I think both things are true. Okay. So let's ask the question. Um, so did the jury get it right? And I know that sounds like an obtuse question. If he murdered them, he should be found guilty, right? But the way the law works is if there's reasonable doubt, you're supposed to vote not guilty. And if you believe the police planted evidence and you had a police officer, the main guy that discovered the glove, taking the Fifth Amendment on the question of have you ever planted evidence? I think as a juror, it would make you wonder. For me, being young and naive, it made me think that they had planted evidence. I also thought he was guilty, but I also thought the jury would find him not guilty. I think all three things are true. Well, the jury did find him not guilty. Not guilty doesn't mean innocent either. Not in our system. Did the jury get it right? Now there's going to be a lot of disagreements on this, so keep the comments respectful. They saw the rich man. This is O.J. Simpson, the rich man, the famous man, the King of Pentacles. They knew about the fiery past, the violence, the domestic abuse. They knew about that. They knew we get the lover's card in the upper right. I think they knew the situation with Ron Goldman was just a circumstantial thing. I don't think they bought into anything more than that. Yeah. But in the environment around, there was all this deceit and this deception from the police and from the prosecution a little bit too, because, you know, they knowingly put on people that they didn't have to put on, right? They called people as witnesses that they probably really didn't need to put on as witnesses. And once you have one person you can't trust, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, and at the center of the reading, we get the Six of Pentacles, giving and receiving. In this case, it's giving and receiving information. They've been given all this information, then they go into the deliberation room, and that's when they start going back and forth with it all. And I think in the documentary, the original vote, like the first vote that they took was like two guilty and 10 not guilty, was the where the baseline for the jury. We got heartache in the environment around it. It was absolutely devastating to the families of Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown Simpson. We have death in the lower left because that's what it's about. We get temperance in the environment around, and we get victory in the lower right. Okay, so the rich man is on trial. The jury goes and deliberates and shares all their information back and forth. And they come back with a win for the rich man, meaning OJ. The murders happened. The jury deliberated on it. And they were an unlikely group of people that came together to decide to do what they did. Why did they do that, though? They absolutely thought he was a domestic abuser. They thought that. They had no doubt about it. I think they even knew that their decision would be heartbreaking to people. But they also knew that the police weren't telling the whole truth. And it was a question of, if there's one bad apple, do you throw out the bag of apples? I don't know. But that's what they decided because they thought that was the safer decision in the sense of what the law says. You're supposed to beyond a reasonable doubt, and there was doubt. So that's why it went down the way it went down. He had great lawyers that absolutely knew what they were doing. He had lots of money, and he was able to manifest the story partly because there was deceit. They weren't making it up completely. Now, did they stretch how much deceit was there? I'm pretty sure they did, but it was enough that the courts bought it and sided with him. So, yeah, I think as uncomfortable as that is in our system, I think both things are true. I think uh, he's guilty, but the jury did the right thing, and I'm sure that's a controversial opinion. Um, but his life turned out to be pretty miserable afterwards. So karma has its way, right? He ended up spending time in prison. Anyhow, he lost all his money. He died pretty much broke, um, and died kind of a painful death. So, anyhow, if you've asked me to read on missing persons cases, I'm looking into them. It doesn't always come very quickly, and I want to be very methodical about them because I don't want to uh, mislead in any way on the information that I'm getting. And sometimes I can sit there and I can scry and things will come really quickly. Sometimes it comes really slowly. Sometimes it's like putting a jigsaw puzzle together little bits at a time. So I'm still working on, I think, three cases that you've asked me to do. If you want to make suggestions, I would certainly look into other cases as well. This was just more for because I had watched that documentary and I thought it was interesting and remember watching the trial as a kid. So anyhow, thank you for watching. I'll be back with another video soon.